Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a Public Safety Committee meeting of the City of Mobile City Council. I'm Gina Gregory. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Scott Jones is one of the other members. Ben Reynolds is not a member of the Public Safety Committee, but he is one of our councilmen and has a proposal that we will discuss shortly. We have some members who are out of town or have some previous engagements and they are not able to be with us today. Oh, here comes one. And he's also a member of the Public Safety Committee meeting. Come on down, William. But we're going to go ahead and get started. What you are getting ready to see is some information that Ms. Henderson and her team have gathered over the last, I don't know how long, months, I suppose. You've been talking to a number of organizations in the city about the city's homeless issues. So this PowerPoint is what they have gathered, just it's for informational purposes only, and it is a good starting point for us. And I'm going to ask Anitra if she and Jordan will go ahead and take over and just go through these slides with us, provide the information. This is not a public hearing. We are not taking questions from the public today. This is strictly informational for us and to provide the information that they have gathered. And if there are any questions following Ms. Henderson's presentation, she will take those. If there are questions she can't answer, then she will go back and get those questions answered as well. So if you will.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. As Councilman Gregory has said, this is a general overview of homeless information. We met with community organizations and we continue to meet with community organizations. We've met with our internal team that works specifically on persons experiencing homelessness, blight, neighborhood community development, and litter, as well as law enforcement. And then we also received some data from federal officials specifically on the homelessness issue. And so we know that these numbers may change, but this is just an overall view of the homeless issue and some action items we are taking. So what you have in front of you is homeless population data. This was provided by Housing First. Currently on their waiting list as of December 2020, there were 697 persons. They did give us numbers from the 2020 point-in-time count. Point-in-time count is done one night, overnight, where they have volunteers that go out into all areas of Mobile County and looked for sheltered, which means they have something over their head, be it a bridge, or unsheltered, those living next to, living in outside, nothing that is covering their heads. And so they did not give us the numbers from point-in-time count 2022. That just happened. 2021, because of COVID, those numbers were pretty skewed. So the most concise number they could give us was from 2020, so in Mobile County, that was 200. But take into account, they do outreach each week. They send out a newsletter of where they're going to do the outreach in multiple places. And this does not include the numbers for Mobile County Public School System. They have their own homeless serving organization as well, a department within the Mobile County Public School System. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Next slide. So the city is going to have 4 focus areas when we're talking about homeless. That is rapid rehousing, that is affordable housing, prevention of services, and then our community and health areas. So with rapid rehousing, the things that we really need you to know is that there are a number of organizations that provide rapid rehousing with a specialty, but those providing those strictly rapid rehousing are the 6 that in front of you: Salvation Army, the Neighboring Center, Housing First, McKinney Place, Family Promise, and Dumas Wesley. You may say, why aren't other organizations up there, i.e., for instance, Penelope House. Penelope House does provide rapid rehousing, but there is a specialty or an issue. So they only provide rapid rehousing for women who are in domestic violence issues. But these are the 6 concise places that provide that rapid rehousing service. When you look at rapid rehousing and persons experiencing homelessness, the HUD housing, urban development categories of homelessness, category 1 is chronic. The category 2 is really homeless high risk. So they are at the point of eviction or have some kind of financial issue. And then category 3 is your shelter, those who are homeless but they're living with family or friends. That is where you would find your Mobile County Public School System numbers. Denise Reamer runs that program with the Mobile County Public School System, and they can have up to 3,500 children in their programs or 400 families. And then category 4 is those experiencing domestic violent issues. Now, HUD only funds category 1, 2, and 4, so not category 3 at this current time. That is the information that we received from Housing First. One of the programs, if we have someone experiencing homelessness that goes through the Housing First process, because Housing First is an initiative of the federal government, they do receive priority through Mobile Housing Authority. So Mobile Housing Authority is currently a partner providing units in this process as well.
Real quick on the rapid housing, how long do people generally stay in the various rapid housing?
So rapid rehousing, to my knowledge, is just to get them sheltered. So that may be a week in a hotel, that may be 2 weeks in a hotel, but it is very temporary housing until they can find sustainable housing for persons experiencing homelessness. Okay, next slide. So the second focus area is affordable housing. As I discussed, Housing First did give us a census of 697 people currently waiting. That was in December. They do say they see about 135 to 200 new cases each month, so that number could be upwards of 800 currently waiting housing. One of the biggest issues is the fair market rate amount. That is the amount that you receive during the voucher system, and this is an example. This is not concrete numbers, but their fair market rate may be $500 a month. Well, currently, affordable housing is more expensive than that $500 a month. Again, this is an example. If there is an apartment that homeless organizations go to acquire for those experiencing homelessness, the amount exceeds that fair market rate. Now, during COVID, during the CARES Act, the federal government did give an incentive on top of that fair market rate, but that still did not meet the demand because under the next one, this is a seller's market. So you have more people needing those affordable housing units, and they are being able to give those affordable housing units to those that are not in a homeless serving organization. So we are seeing more families using those affordable housing units than the homeless serving organizations are able to provide. We went through the categories of homelessness. The hardest to the hardest to house is your unaccompanied adult. So the first to place are families, and then women with children, and then unaccompanied. So that is what you will see. That's mostly what we'll talk about is the unaccompanied adults that are not being able to place. And then, of course, you have passed through the ARPA funding $29 million for affordable housing, but again, that was just passed. Those things have to be developed. Once they're developed, it may be, and I'll lean on Jamie, maybe 24 months before any of that affordable housing to be able to take place.
Yeah, most of those proposals are still in review. Development will be at least 24 months after.
What's the estimate on units for that funding?
I'd have to go back and count. We're looking
Ballpark, I don't need exact.
600 to 1,000, is that right?
Thanks.
These are new homes or apartments that are being constructed, or just units that have come available?
Combination of all that. New single family apartment complexes, everything.
And these are all new?
Some of it could be rehab, depends on the proposal. We do have a couple of rehab options.
And when will these come online?
We're in the middle of selection still. A lot of it has to do with housing authority and can we get access to their properties. There's some HUD maneuvering we have to work on the public housing side, and we don't usually deal with that side. If we can get a hold of some of those properties, we're looking at 24 to 36 months. They'd come online.
4 to 6 months?
24 to
24.
36, 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah, normal, just a tax credit development, it's going to be 18 to 24 months minimum. That's what most of them are linked to tax credits to leverage the funds.
One question here, for folks that go into that program, are there requirements there that, obviously it's a government program. What's the requirements for those individuals? They have to pass drug tests, they have to remain employed, et cetera, et cetera.
You're talking about affordable housing or
Yep.
the homeless programs? Or both?
The ARPA funding.
So that's up to the developers. Most of them do have a minimal credit check and a background check. There's no federal requirement. The housing authority, if the housing authority vouchers are involved, they do have their own rules on that, and I think they have a minimal background check, credit check also. They have a preference for working families at the housing authority, and homeless and domestic violence are required to have a preference for.
Okay. Last two focus areas. The third one is prevention. That is what you'll see. We have more than 25 providers who provide services to those experiencing homelessness. We did, during the COVID process, started back then a weekly conversation with our nonprofits, and then specifically those experiencing dealing with homeless serving organizations. And one of the things that we were finding the gap of services was a list of those churches or organizations that were feeding. So there is a coordinated list by Lifelines Counseling that was done during 2020 and 2021, and it's currently being updated, but it is who is feeding, what time they're feeding, and what area. So we did provide that for you. And then there is a coordinated service system called the HEMIS system that is designed specifically for persons experiencing homelessness. So for instance, if I am homeless and I go to the Salvation Army, they would put my name in this system of all of the services that I need, and all the nonprofits who are a part of that system could see that, could help and serve the needs that I have. One of the things that we have right now is many of our nonprofits are not a part of that HEMIS system, and so we're going to research and figure out what are the gaps and why those are not, those organizations are not using that system to provide coordination. And then the fourth one, I'll turn it over to Casey Calloway to talk about community health and safety.
So I've been doing research along with my fabulous intern. We've been doing research to figure out how we could address a lot of the issues that y'all raised, a lot of the opportunities y'all raised, including how do we get dumpsters to some of these areas, looking at what other communities around the country have done, what could work to really specifically address litter, and then also to address the problem of bathroom facilities. So a lot of the effort we've seen and the challenges we're facing is how do we pay people to pick up litter in their communities? A lot of cities are doing this really effectively using stipends. A lot of those stipends are just gift cards to grocery stores, or like those kind of blank Visa cards. So you could pay a person or community members to pick up trash. They bring their trash bags to you. You pay them on a per trash bag basis. There are some rules associated with that we're still trying to figure out and understand about, a fair wage for a fair day of work. So it's trying to make sure we're maneuvering what those look like. But what we're hoping to do is to implement some ideas, get a small pilot project put in place in one area, try it in another area, see if they're effective. In terms of bringing dumpsters to communities, that has been tried apparently several times over our history. What we find is that if a dumpster is in a place for any long length of time, it's discovered and becomes a place for all community members to bring their larger items rather than going to the dump. But we found out some pricing on putting a dumpster in an area for like 2 to 3 days. So we could do it on a short-term basis, really get an area cleaned up, and then move that dumpster and pick another location. I think the same thing goes with porta potties and showers. Talk to people who are in that business and got pricing on how to do that as well. The challenges we're really looking at that are listed up here is a lot of this isn't long-term City of Mobile opportunity obligation, but getting some nonprofit partners who'd be willing to engage, especially with creating the stipends and finding ways to pay our homeless community. The City of Mobile could certainly provide some funding support for those organizations, but for them to manage the day-to-day operations be more efficient. But also making sure that whatever we do is providing folks that interim step and not making it more advantageous to stay homeless, or very importantly, we want to reduce our homeless population with the first 3 goals we've listed here, as opposed to bringing new folks into the community. So it's walking a really good tightrope to find the best opportunities to help the folks facing homelessness so that they can get into a real and effective shelter.
We'll quickly go over the gaps in services that we found talking to the organizations and internally. Of course, transportation is one of the issues, and then child care directory for those who are experiencing homelessness, who actually have transportation and want to have interviews there. We don't have a directory of child care services that will provide child care for their children while they go to these services. A one-stop shop for services. We used to have a facility here in the city where those experiencing homelessness could come, get a shower, find out what services are available. That is no longer here. We talked a little bit about the fair market rate. The incentive during COVID, during the CARES Act, that incentive ends in March. So it ends, if I'm not mistaken, March the 31st. And then we talked about Category 3, where Mobile County Public School System usually has funding available to do rapid rehousing for their children. They cannot use those for vouchers for fair market rate as well. So they have high restrictions on how they can use that funding specifically for those experiencing homelessness. Also, a group home directory. There is not currently one of those available for those who are homeless and cannot take care of themselves once they are stable. Are there group homes where they can be housed? And then one of the things that we want to monitor is the foster care program. Of course, when those that age out of foster care, we want to make sure that they are not going into our homeless population. Casey, you want to do the last 3 for litter abatement?
Yeah. So litter abatement, shower facilities, nonprofit service providers, really it's about figuring out how to, I think they're each opportunities, but with some significant challenges. So figuring out how to make that right, it just speaks back to the original goal, is how do we do litter abatement on private property that is different than how we do it on our own city properties. We do cleanups regularly. We have teams who can and do, but how do we do it when a homeless encampment ends up being on private property? So it's working with property owners to figure out how to clean up that area, because it ends up, it's a violation of our litter ordinances. So we've got to figure out how to be helpful and get that done right and well, but also get the areas cleaned up. And again, what about bathroom and shower facilities? It's about how permanent and where, and what does that look like? What does moving it around look like? Is that effective? Is it efficient? Is it, again, is it I think folks consistently argue whether or not providing those services is encouraging people to either remain homeless or come in from other areas, or is it providing services to people in need? And then I think the same thing is we really need to find some great nonprofits who could help out. We've got great nonprofits who are providing services across the board to homeless organizations, to our homeless population, to folks facing homelessness, we don't have anyone focusing on the litter and pollution issues. So figuring out how to work with some of those organizations to get them in line and involved and engaged in that is a big next step.
So quickly, we'll go over a few action items. Of course, we want to stay within the focus area. We have wonderful nonprofits who are doing work in the community, but as a government, we want to convene, analyze, find those gaps in services, communicate to those organizations, and then internally come back to see how we can help in this process. And so our number one, of course, is to make sure that everyone is housed. So rapid rehousing, one of the things that we're doing is collecting data, budgets on those organizations, how many are rehoused. We know how many are in the system, but each month, how many are being rehoused, those available units for rapid rehousing and any barriers that they may have. Under affordable housing, we are helping Housing First put together a list of income-based apartments, those that are changing hands from, we have more private units than we have those that are federally funded, and so they change hands very, very rapidly, so to help them put that list together. The City Council passed the RRR ordinance, which is if you are a company that has more than 10 rental units, you needed to have a business license, so we want to look at that ordinance as well, not the ordinance, the companies that fall under that ordinance to see how they can assist, and then help to speak with our federal officials about the fair market rate to see and monitor if that's going to increase, if they're going to do this past March, and then help our education system if they need our assistance with those rapid rehousing restrictions to have those conversations with our federal officials. Under prevention, we want to assist with the workflow of services. We know there's a lot of nonprofits. We want to make sure that there's no overlap in services and making sure that everyone knows about the HEMIS system, and if not, how can we help them through that project? And then research what a one-stop shop day center would actually look like in this community, who would be able to do that, and where would it be best located at. Next slide. And then Casey, go ahead.
I think on this, it's just more of the same. I think the action for us next is to test in small cases these ideas, build a relationship with nonprofits to get them engaged, see what putting a dumpster out for a short time period would do, see what that looks like to move it around. I think the dollars in this are not extreme in terms of doing some test cases and some test projects. It's just about figuring out which one to do for how long to see what would work.
The last thing is we have looked at other cities and monitoring other ordinances. The newest one is in the city of Pensacola. They did adopt an ordinance in late 2021 and 2022. They are enforcing that. And so we have talked to their officials. They're currently going through some guidelines and maybe some guideline changes because they're working through this with the Department of Justice. So final thoughts. Of course, these numbers change. These are numbers from Housing First, the 697, but don't forget that Mobile County Public School System has thousands of children, hundreds of families that are underlying homeless category 3, but your unaccompanied adults probably are what we see the most out in the community. So if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer those. If we can't answer those questions, we will take those back to those nonprofits that actually do the great work.
Any questions from the council?
Yeah.
Ben?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Of the 697 on the Housing First waiting list, what is the makeup of those folks? Do we know that, if they're category 1, 2, 3, or 4?
So earlier we sent you the census detail of the December 2020 numbers. And so from the 697, there are 409 are adults, 166 are children, and then it breaks down into chronically homeless, unaccompanied. Your biggest is adults with disabling or serious medical conditions worsened by living outdoors or unsheltered or literally homeless adults. So that's 193 of that number.
So approximately 193. Okay. I've got unless somebody else has any questions, I've got a short little presentation here I wanted to do.
Well, let's go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll get to yours, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions from the council? Scott, did you?
I do have a question. Thank
Okay.
you. With regards to the ordinance that Pensacola put forward, is that pretty much in line with the one that's in front of this council right now? And if so, and actually if not, what I'd like to know is, could they provide us some early, and I know it's only a few months in existence, but what's some of the lessons they've learned as they've enforced this? And, what some of the roadblocks, what some of the successes that they have seen? Have they been able to give us any impacts, how this has impacted their community, positive or negative?
I'm happy to get that information from Pensacola. Again, they started enforcing it late January. So I'm happy to get that information. The only thing that they would provide, of course, came from the Department of Justice on the enforcement piece and the incarceration piece, that they're trying to work out that process. What does that look like? Because if you continuously incarcerate someone and they're trying to be rehoused, that criminal background may deter them from getting permanent housing.
Do we have a copy of their ordinance?
I do not have that, but I can provide that for you.
I read their ordinance, and it's pretty doggone close.
Mr. Arledge?
The one that I saw, which is Pensacola Ordinance 8119, is pretty similar and has been in effect, according to the Muni Code at least, since 2000. The last amendment to that was in 2014. Now, they may not have been enforcing it, or may have had issues with enforcement, or they might have adopted something brand new the other day. I don't know. But they do have one on the books today on Muni Code that's pretty similar.
Okay, but the other side of that, Anitra, and you have talked to us about this, is what is going on with the Justice Department monitoring this, and why are they involved?
They are involved because of the enforcement.
With the code enforcement portion of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam
Any
Chair.
other questions about this portion of the presentation? Anybody?
I don't have any questions. Not at this point.
So you have a presentation?
Yeah, very, very short. It's really just pictures.
All right. Mr. Reynolds has his own PowerPoint, so go ahead.
And it's not much of a PowerPoint, I'll tell you. But I did receive a bunch of photos from constituents, and to sort of illustrate why this came about, that I'm not out to target the homeless people. I'm truly not. As I've tried my very best from the outset, I've tried to separate these two to say, look, we've got a public safety, public health, aesthetics issue that exists heavily in my district. And I don't know how heavy y'all are feeling it where you are, but I am just stretched. We are getting overwhelmed in my district, and we have to do something as a government to intervene. And I think this ordinance resolves the issue for my constituents. So long as good, but you still got to have good administrative policy and so on and so forth. So we'll go ahead and get started. You can see it's my district today, your district tomorrow. Let's not hope so. Let's hope that's not the case. Go ahead. All right, so these pictures were just taken a couple days ago. All right, so you see the bridge on the left is a bridge where there are no campers present, none. You can see it's pretty pristine nearly, and that's on Halls Mill Road. And then you see the bridge on the right, and you can see the campers' belongings up there. You can see litter scattered all about. And, those campers that are there are using the bathroom somewhere too. And it's going in the river, most likely. I mean, that's my guess. So it's a problem. Go ahead and go to the next one. And this is that same bridge. You can see the same camping supplies and all that there, and you can see the litter in the middle picture. And then on the right, you can see all that's under the bridge. You know, it's very clearly coming from the campers. And you know, some may say, well, what about people throwing it off the side of the road here? You know, that's a busy roadway. Maybe people are throwing it off the side of the road and it's all landing there. I don't believe that's the case. But I had somebody submit me some pictures of inside of a camp under this very bridge. So go to the next one. We can kind of get a picture of what inside of a camp looks like. This is at nighttime. You can see in the top left picture, there's litter and you know, belongings and stuff scattered all about. The middle picture there at the top, you can see there's a little fire there under our bridge. And you know, the other ones just illustrate sort of living conditions in this, that you know, these folks that are down here in the campsites, they're just, you know, this isn't a healthy, good living arrangement for them. You know, there's no telling what's going on down there, you know. So and this particular location gets calls and calls and calls and calls from neighbors. You know, they leave and they come back, and it's not the same group. It's another group. It's a known spot. You know, people are always here. But it's not just this location. There are several others. Go to the next slide. Here's some of the other bridges. I think this is Range Line Road, I believe, near the Cypress Shores neighborhood, not far from, you know, some of our very best neighborhoods. We got personal belongings being stored there, and they're stored there for who knows how long. And you know, that's a problem. Shouldn't be there. And this ordinance aims to stop some of this stuff. All right, go to the next one. Now, this one I thought was very interesting because tomorrow at 8:15 a.m., I'll be cutting the ribbon on the new Aldi grocery store in Tillman's Corner. A brand new development that's going on there. We're trying to attract everyone. We're trying to show the world, hey, look what we're doing. And just 200 yards from where that ribbon cutting is going to take place, this is what's there. This is over behind Lowe's. You've got, this is our rights of way. I mean, this is not something that our neighbors want. You know, who knows what sanitary conditions are within that camp. Go ahead and go to the next one. And it's not just these areas. These are areas pictures taken from within the car. So these are all illustrative of the rights of ways. Top left, you can see shopping cart, mattress, litter, piles of litter there in the middle. Look at the one in the middle at the top. I mean, that's a lot of litter. That's from an encampment, somebody from camping there. And these are all scattered all throughout the district. It's not like we can just put a dumpster at all these locations. It's just not going to resolve it. You know, you can't put a dumpster everywhere. Shopping carts there in the middle, and there's another shot of some additional litter there on the right. So this camp, so we got under the bridges all over throughout my district, probably many others. You got rights of ways throughout the district, all scattered about. Go to the next one. All right, and then you have the larger encampments. Now this one here was a pretty sizable encampment, and it crossed both public and private property. So this ordinance doesn't address the private property issue we have. A lot of that's administrative policy, and you know, there's laws on the book for trespassing and that sort of thing. But you can see in the middle on the left side, you got a fire going. You know, you got these elaborate sort of structures. And then if you look at the one all the way to the right here, there's a gentleman in a tent. Now you tell me that's sanitary living conditions. You tell me that's something we ought to accept as a public, to allow somebody to live in these sort of conditions on our property. It should not be allowed to happen. I mean, these guys are being subjected to who knows what in here. Imagine if it's a family. Imagine if it's a spouse or a woman in there, or children are caught up in this situation. I mean, I don't know the rate of abuse and all that sort of stuff here, but this is unmonitored. This is something we're allowing to happen on our public property. I don't think that's acceptable to anyone. So that's what the ordinance is here to address. And I did this next picture was an interesting picture. As people come and, well, no, that's just more pictures of a camp. And you can see it's pretty elaborate there. Crosses public and private property. Litter everywhere. There's not bathrooms. These camps pop up all over the place. There's no stopping it with putting dumpsters out there. All right, last one. This one's the more. So this was a sign one of the guys made. Read between the lines. That's what when you go out there and try to intervene, that's what you see. And we're allowing this to happen on our public property. And I know that y'all may not be feeling it quite the way I'm feeling it, and the citizens of District 4 feel it, but we've got to do something to stop it. All right, that's good on the presentation. I got a couple other things I want to hit here.
We do that. We were making sure that we kept these things separate. So the first portion was just the information that was gathered by the administration and staff, as well as looking at action items. And I think before we leave today, we just want to make sure that we are moving forward with these action items, and you have a priority list, and you will be reaching back out to all the different organizations to see what we can do, and not just say, well, here's this PowerPoint, here are what the problems are. We think the problems are. We want to make sure that we are actually taking action and moving forward with trying to resolve some of these issues as best we can.
Correct. We have been meeting with the organizations. We have not talked to them specifically about the action items. We wanted to show those to the council first, but everyone was in agreement with the gaps in services and how we need to move forward with something. And so we will be going back out to those organizations to do just that.
Okay. And as far as what the council is doing or not doing, we need to make sure that we understand what our role is in this. I think the Public Safety Committee is a good venue for providing us with information and action items and what legislatively we need to be looking at. If there was anything else that we need to do, then, let's discuss that.
Right. One of the biggest issues is not just here in Mobile, it's a national issue of affordable housing. And so taking the first step of approving those ARP dollars will put us in the right direction. But again, that is 24 months to 36 months away.
Madam Chair.
Any other questions about this particular portion?
Well, yeah, I don't know what portion we're talking about, but yeah, I've got some facts here that are important to that conversation.
I just wanted to make sure that we were keeping your proposal separate from this.
Oh,
but if the two were going to blend, then
well, I got some information to help separate some of those things, I believe.
all right. Go ahead, Mr. Reynolds.
All right, so we've got of the information that was provided from Housing First. There's four types. This is all based on the federal standard. There's four types of homelessness, and I would contend that this ordinance really only addresses a very small piece of all the various types of homelessness. So I think it's important that we talk about it in that context, that it really only affects Category 1 homeless, but not even that entire category. Because we're talking about camping, people on public property only, not any of the private property. This ordinance doesn't address the private property, it's just public property. So a Category 1 homeless, according to the federal definition, an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, such as those living in emergency shelters, transitional housing, or places not meant for habitation. So those three parts of that first one. Emergency shelters, transitional housings, or places not meant for habitation. Well, really, this ordinance only affects one of those three. Because if they're in an emergency shelter, they're not subjected to this law because they're not camping on the side of the road. If they're in transitional housing, again, if they're in transitional housing, they're not camping on the side of the road. So really the only component piece of this definition is places not meant for habitation. So the homeless population as a whole is really not, this doesn't go after to affect all of them. This is a very narrow focus. I mean, this is very narrow to people camping on the side of the road. So Housing First numbers. This is the federal standard. The federal government uses Housing First numbers. According to the 2020 data, the total number of persons unsheltered, which is that category, Category 1, is 364 people. That is the Housing First number, it's federal standard. Some say it's much higher. Some say it's drastically blown out of proportion, including the ACLU and everyone else. Say it's almost 6,500 people in Mobile alone. But the federal government reports, according to the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, they report statewide in Alabama, there's only 3,351 people that are homeless. That's statewide. So those numbers are a little bit blown out of proportion. So, and then the numbers from Housing First here are inclusive of Baldwin County and Mobile County, okay, as a whole. Well, we're only dealing with an ordinance that addresses issues within the city of Mobile. So how do we determine how many beds do we need when this ordinance passes, and it's going to adversely affect only those people that are camping in public property, not the people on private property, not the people in emergency shelters, not the people in a hotel, nobody else. It affects that one narrow group. So how do we figure out how many beds do we need? I've asked for the data. I've asked. There's no very precise one that narrows it down, so I've kind of come up with my own number. I think you mentioned a number of 196 or something like that earlier. But if we take the whole number of the point-in-time count, which is the federal standard of 364 people, and we basically look at Baldwin County, it's about half the size of Mobile County, and we look at the city of Mobile, and it makes up about half the people in the entire county, and then we just say discount them at 25%, we come up with about the same number, 190-something people. So if we pass this thing tomorrow or next week, we're talking about needing to find accommodation for 190-something people. And I think there's probably already enough there. The problem is we got to push them out of there. We have to have the both components of this, that we have to have our partners in all of this, organizations trying to pull people in, and we as a government have to do our part to push people out, because we don't want them there. We don't want them sitting on the side of the road, living in squalor. And there's time after time after time in cities across this country who have relied on just trying to pull people in, and I would say they're not doing a great job. I read an article here from San Francisco. It's called Slow Motion Suicide in San Francisco. The city is carrying out a bizarre medical experiment, which they are helping homeless drug addicts use drugs. It's handing a loaded gun to a suicidal person. People with mental health issues don't need to be on the side of the road. Families with children do not need to be on the side of the road. We got to do better. We can do better, but there has to be a component of this where we push them out. I'll wrap up, but as far as the legality of this goes, it is no doubt 100% been defended in court on more than one occasion, the enforcement of this law with the right administrative policy in place, which has nothing to do with this legislative body. We are the legislators. We create the law. They create the policy. And with the right administrative policy, with the right approach and partnership with everyone that has been coming to speak out against this ordinance, with the right partnerships, we can do this, and it's not going to, harm anybody. It's going to make this situation better. So I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody's got any.
All right, any other council members? Scott? All right.
The challenge that exists, and Ben, I appreciate you bringing this ordinance to the city council because it's forced this discussion. And it's a discussion that's needed to have been had for a long time. The challenge is our job and the city administrator's jobs is to provide a safe and secure environment to every member of this community. That includes the homeless, and that includes those that don't want the homeless living outside their back door. The challenge of this ordinance is when enacted, it's going to have second and third order impacts that I'm not so sure that we have done our job to properly ensure that systems are in place to take care of those issues that are going to be driven by this ordinance. There's a percentage of these homeless who desire to assimilate back into society. And I think that there are programs that we have, and here's a big question mark that I have. Do we have the programs in this city to facilitate that? Do we have, I know we don't, because we're sitting here looking at this 24-hour center, the resource center that provides the health care, the job skills training and placement, the transportation, the legal assistance, et cetera, that we used to have. We need to have that capability. We don't have it. And if it is there, I haven't seen it. We may have that in bits and pieces across a number of these 20-plus organizations that we have in the city, but we're not maximizing the efficiency of these resources to make sure all these bases are covered. And I think, as we've discussed, there needs to be an agency that is synchronizing all of that we can fill those gaps. When those gaps are filled, I'll be a lot more confident to be a yes on this. There's a percent that don't have any desire to assimilate back into societal norms. And there's no volunteer organization that I've talked to that has been honest with me that said that is not the case. And they said what that percentage is from the homeless places in Hawaii, California, here, typically that number is about 30% from what I've seen in my experience. There's our problem. Because those who don't want to assimilate and don't want to get into these programs and want to fight the system, like we saw in the last picture, I think that's what this ordinance gets after. Then there's a percent of those who cannot assimilate back into society. We heard that today in the city council meeting. I've been talking to a number of state administrators. We need a long-term mental health facility in the state. And what we're doing, and they just passed millions of dollars to get after short-term mental health care. That's not what we need. And that's not what we're talking about with the homeless. We need a place to house folks who cannot assimilate back into society ever and get them put up into an institution so they're no longer a danger to themselves or a danger to others. And today we don't have that. And I would encourage everybody sitting out here to call your representative. And, it's an election year. We can get some things done with regards to that. I'm beating that drum, and I hope that there's a lot of others that are doing the same thing. But that's something that I think is a major shortfall and a pitfall that we have right now. And like I say, we heard it again this morning, that is significant. And I don't know, what do we have in Mobile to put that square peg in that square hole? I don't know. And that's another big question mark that I need an answer to before I can vote on this ordinance that's coming before us. I think we do need a city ordinance. There's a time and place for that, and I think there is a time to hold people accountable and force them to assimilate into societal norms that everybody else has to live by. And yes, I've been raised in the church, and I understand all the verses and all of that. And, it gets back to, if you have the ability to work, you work. And if you choose not to, then there's verses for that too. It's not the city's responsibility to take care of those who don't want to take care of themselves. It is the city's responsibility to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And there's a differentiating factor that's got to be addressed and outlined. This ordinance gets after that. My issue right now is that there's some things that I can't answer personally from a resource perspective, and I think this may be a little bit premature. I do want to see what Pensacola is doing. I do want to see how the courts, handle this as we go forward. Yes, this is an issue. Yes, it needs to be addressed. I see it in my district as well, Ben. But I think we've got to do it the right way.
Madam Chair, one comment here.
All right, go ahead.
This, I did the very best I could to illustrate exactly what the problem is. And this problem's been going on for years, right? And us putting it off to try to resolve the broader homeless issue that exists, no doubt. This issue I want to try to resolve too, and in the most appropriate way we can, okay? But that's a separate discussion. We should be able to say at a baseline, to start this thing off, that it's not good for the person camping on public property and right-of-ways, living in the squalor that exists, living a very poor lifestyle. It's not good for them. It's not good for our rivers. It's not good for the rest of the constituents out there either. So at a very minimum baseline starting point, we should be able to pass this ordinance and take care of that problem right now. We can nip it right in the bud. We got partners in the deal. We can, you already got folks working on it on the executive branch to come up with administrative policy. We can nip it in the bud right now and pass this ordinance. And then we can get into addressing these other categories of homelessness, category 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other two components of it, of category 1, we can start having those discussions. Let's get that problem resolved too. But quit putting the broader public at risk, as we are right now. It exists right here. I just showed you pictures taken yesterday, a couple days ago. Quit putting them at risk.
One question. Where you plan to put them? Where you plan to put them when you hurt them from under the bridges? Where you plan to put them when they get out of jail in 6 months? Jail's already overcrowded. What you plan to do? What's your plan of action? McKinney Place is closed. The mission is full. You have to have a plan of action. What is it? You just can't herd them into a concentration camp, and you're treating them like them. You keep saying them, like they're a menace to society. What you gonna do? You just can't have a plan to pass an ordinance that criminalizes someone with nothing for them to do, nowhere for them to go. So the unintended consequence here is bigger than the problem that you're trying to solve. I'm gonna wait and make comments later, but I think my mind's pretty much made up on this.
I can answer the question. The question was asked, where are they going to put them?
Mr. Reynolds, go ahead. Did you?
Yeah, where are you going to put them? What are we going to do with them now? You going to let them sit there and still be on the side of the road under a bridge, living in squalor? That's a better option, right? Than saying, hey, we do have some services. Sounds like we're going to be getting some more services coming. I mean, how bad do we have to let it get for them before we start taking action on their behalf? This is not out to get them. This is to say, hey, guys, this is a very poor lifestyle. One is that we shouldn't accept as a citizenry, and one that we should not allow to continue to happen in our public areas, especially with women and children and families, and, drug abuse and physical abuse and all the other things that come along with it. Shame on us for allowing it to continue to happen. This ordinance takes them out of that situation, takes them out of it.
All right, audience. A question, kind of a follow-up to both Mr. Reynolds and Carol. There was a mention of about 200 people, unaccompanied men, who may be part of the homeless population. And we also have information about the need for housing and how right now some of the hotel rooms, houses that have been made available for people looking for rapid rehousing are being used in the private sector. So if there are close to 200 people who might be in these encampments that could use a bed, do we have 200 beds available for more than a couple of nights? I mean, are they even available? I think that's kind of a follow-up to what William was asking. If people are moved away from where they are camping, then do we have a place for them to go, even temporarily?
So I'm going to answer that to the best of my ability, but
Yeah,
get back
I'm
to
sorry
you.
for putting you on the spot. But.
So the process that Housing First does, they do go into these encampments. They do the outreach. They may rapid rehouse, which is only for a week or 2 weeks. After that process, they are on a waiting list. So I'm going to say, but I'm going to check and confirm, some of those that are in those camps may have already been rapidly rehoused and may be on waiting list
For
to
more,
be
for more permanent, and they're
for-
already in
for
housing?
sustainable housing.
So they may already be in
Yes.
some? Jamie, you have?
So, yeah, the continuum of care system is a scoring system, essentially, the intake system. And so when you go in through intake, you get housed based on your score.
Uh-huh.
So elderly, families with small children, a
Right.
female-only head of household, those are much higher score than an individual man in most cases.
I think what Ben was referring to were probably the unaccompanied males. Is that what you
I'm
were-
talking only about the people that are camping in the rights of way and on public property. That's all this is to address.
And I don't have demographics
essentially-
on that, beyond the continuum of care's annual point in time count, which, again, just happened last month. So we don't have
Yeah,
those numbers
it's a
yet.
point in time, so, yeah.
Yeah, a point in time, that's the federal standard, is what they use in the federal government, and that's what they report on, and so I don't know what other data we're supposed to use, you know, I know we got a public problem, okay? We all agree, we want to try to find a resolution to it. This group says the number's way high, this group says this number's different, and, you know, this one says, but you got to do this and that. Well, we got to adopt some sort of standard at some point and start making policy, because this problem isn't going away. And we shouldn't wait until it gets like San Francisco and LA and Austin, Texas, and all these other cities. We shouldn't wait till it gets that bad before we just make up our mind we need to start protecting our citizens. We should make it up now.
Hopefully Alabama won't get there, you know, especially giving drugs or giving shots to homeless people. We've already been through that one time with the Tuskegee experiment with another group we know. So I hope you're not looking for anything like that.
I think he was using that as a negative example.
That's right. It's too much, just way too much, way too far out there. Man, I got to use a line from Fred Richardson's comments. Man, when your spaceship lands, let me know.
To quote the
Yeah, I
to
mean,
quote
you're
Fred.
on another planet, brother.
He had so many. I didn't know which one you were going with.
Jesus.
I've
This-
illustrated
Hang on,
pictures
hang
here
on,
for you,
hang
Mr.
on, hang
Carroll.
on. William has the floor.
Go ahead. You know, this weekend was Mardi Gras. We had several events, right? And a lot of times in having events, you have needs. So you look for people to help you with those needs, but sometimes you look for people to help while you're trying to satisfy a need. So maybe we need to find those within the homeless ranks that can help us resolve some of our needs so that we can find a way to have them have some type of resource or payment cycle, or some way to pay for a place to stay in time. This weekend, we used 2 homeless people or individuals within our system, my home, my family, to do what we needed to do. We also made sure that they were taken care of extremely well, which gave them a great maybe 1 or 2 nights in a place that they could use or they would like to be. See, so when you find a way to help those that can't help themselves, then we're doing a job. But when we're herding them into an encampment, matter of fact, where's the encampment at? Where is the encampment? I would like to know, because I didn't even know we had an encampment here for the homeless. Where is it? Somebody please tell me. Let me know how many are there. Let me know whether or not they're behind a gate or a fence or locked up in some room somewhere, because I'd love to know that, because that seems like that's even more dangerous than having them live on their own. You know, I agree with Scott when he says that the mental part of this is an issue. This got really bad when they closed Cersei. I don't know if y'all remember that. Got really bad when they closed Cersei. I mean, so we need to go back and revisit that. But we just can't create a criminal problem with no resolution. We have to get some resolution and some help in place and other things before we start to create a bigger problem here. And that's where I am. I don't see an end of the road. I don't see any help. All I see is a bigger problem right now by creating an ordinance that criminalizes people.
Ms. Henderson, also, we've had some folks come to the council to talk with us about plans that they had for, I think it was Driftwood Village. Is that correct? What was the name of it?
I don't remember the name of it. I
Harbor?
spoke with the group, and it was tiny homes.
I'm sorry.
A tiny homes village, essentially.
Driftwood Housing Project, okay.
We met with
I was
them.
trying to remember the name of it, because I know plans are underway, but you're a ways off, I think, from, for some plans. Have you got property yet? Is that what you're still?
Yeah, we put them with Shayla for zoning. There's some
that's right.
mechanical,
Yeah.
terminology kind of stuff there. Yeah. Right. And they
So
gotta
that
get with
is
the
something
state
that's,
occupancy laws on size
Yeah.
and that restrooms, that kind of stuff.
So
but that's at least something that's on the forefront that could be a possibility. Also establishing possibly a new 15-place-like center where in a area that is convenient for most people to come for day services, whether it's showers, learning about services that are available, lunch, all those kinds of things that is what 15 Place used to provide. So you're looking into that as well? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. A lot going on, yeah.
I, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I've got, I mean, we've heard from the Driftwood Village folks. I've invited someone who lives in District 4 here is actually a home builder, and has evaluated some of these areas. If y'all want to have him come down and give his thought on this, I mean, he'd be happy to. But I don't know if that may be a great idea, but it may not resolve all the issue for us either. I think it can sometimes get cost way up there and that sort of thing. So
Chairwoman.
I don't want to hang our hat on that resolving this issue, especially without any push.
Hang on. Let me go to Scott.
We've got so this Driftwood Housing, is this a transitory housing center that let me finish my question, please. Where we take them in and there's a selected process that they go through to rehabilitate them back into society, or is this we're just taking them in and we're going to house them for an undetermined period of time because they're homeless and they have a roof over their head for as long as they choose to stay there? So thank you. That answers the question. Here's through experience of, and I've seen Seattle, I've seen Los Angeles, I've seen San Diego, I've seen Hawaii. And Hawaii's probably the worst because you get college kids over there that go to school, flunk out, can't get a ticket back to the States, and they choose to stay on the beach. But what I saw is when you have a city that provides services with no requirement from that individual to receive those services, that area then starts growing larger and larger and larger to the point that it becomes unmanageable, unfundable, and unobtainable, because then you're just providing services and there's no exit strategy for folks. So I think there's got to be an exit strategy for those. And that's why I think this mental health issue is so great, because that's that last category that they never will. There's a percentage of these that never will assimilate back into a norm. And let's be very clear, there is a percentage of this homeless that is a menace to our society. It exists. I have a very good friend that is a business owner whose daughter almost got raped by a person that was mentally unstable. And there's no place for this individual long term. I took in a homeless person. I was living in Midtown. And I brought this person in. He was about 60 years old. I taught him a skill. He worked for me for about 3 months. I gave him a roof over his head. My wife cooked meals for him, washed his clothes every day of the week. I left for 1 week, and he stole everything that I had with the business. My business was wiped out. And I knew him, worked with him every day for 4 months. Those individuals that have those issues have no propensity to work back into a societal norm without some significant mental help and assistance. And that's a huge piece that we're missing here. And you know, Ben, to your point, and to William's point, if we take them out of that tent and they fall into that category, we have no place to put them. The ones that we can put into a system that we can transition them back into society, great. My concern is the ones that we can't. And we're just moving from one problem to another at that point. But it's something we definitely have to address. I just don't know if we're ready to address it.
Right. Just kind of a point of clarification, we obviously know that we are not here to solve all of the problems today. We know that. We know there are a lot of gaps in services, a lot of needs that we want to start working toward to find resolutions to. So that we all know and we all agree on. Any ordinances moving forward, you know, we have to see where that lands. And I thank Ben for at least, if nothing else, he has certainly opened up the conversation that, as we all agree, was needed. Whether his ordinance passes or not, we'll find out next week. But we need to continue working on this and keep the, focus on how we resolve the issues that are facing us and to help the population that needs the help that we're not able to give at this point. Ben had asked about questions. This is not a public hearing. However, if we ask a question of somebody here, we would like for them to answer. And Ben, I know you have someone here. Would you like to ask him any questions or speak? Steve, would you? Anything?
What? Come down to the mic.
All right. Anybody else? All right.
No.
No, of us. Of us, yeah. Any other council members?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now.
All right, go ahead, William.
I'm just going to be open and honest and transparent right now. I can't vote for it.
Okay. I think we pretty well figured that one out. All right. Anybody else? Any other council members? All right. If not, the committee's adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding the meeting.